Maybe it's this. John, turn it around. Hello? Hello? Good, thank you. Working out our technical difficulties still, but it's early days. So good evening and welcome to the City of Petaluma regular meeting of the City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, May 16th. And we will have roll call, please.
Barrett.
Here.
Barnacle.
Here.
Fisher. Sorry, Fisher, I did not hear you. Your mic on. Brendan, is Councilmember Fisher's mic working?
Let the record show that Councilmember Fisher is here.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy. I think we're having some audio issues. Mayor Barrett, can you confirm Councilmember Healy is in attendance?
Yes, Councilmember Healy is here.
We'll try Councilmember King,
Here.
Councilmember McDonald,
Here.
and Vice Mayor Posake. Mayor Barrett.
Vice Mayor Posake is also here.
Thank you. All members are present.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And we'll have a moment of silence in memory of those who were murdered in Buffalo and also for the 1 million plus people in our country who died from COVID. Thank you. And now I'm going to read the new standards for how we are taking speaker cards since we are now in hybrid meetings. So I'm just going to ask those in attendance to submit speaker cards in the drop box, which is in the front of the room to your right, if you wish to speak. And those of you wishing to speak during general public comment, you need to submit your speaker card in the box prior to the start of general public comment. Those attending virtually can raise their hand in Zoom when instructed to do so. So now we are going to start with proclamations. And we have 2 proclamations today. And the first proclamation is National Peace Officers Memorial Day and National Police Week. And I'm going to ask Councilmember McDonald to please give this to the Chief of Police. So whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day and May 11th through May 17th as National Police Week in recognition of law enforcement officers nationwide who've sacrificed their lives or been disabled in the performance of their duties while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. And whereas it is important that all members of our community know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of those who dedicate their lives to the law enforcement profession and to keeping our communities safe. And whereas the members of the Petaluma Police Department and law enforcement throughout the state and nation risk their lives on a daily basis to maintain peace within the city of Petaluma and protect the lives and property of everywhere in our community. And whereas the members of Petaluma Police Department provide a vital public service safeguarding the rights and freedoms of all community members in the city. And whereas it is important to always remember Petaluma police officers Julius Bloom, 1898, Bert Johnson, 1925, Russell Rasmussen, 1927, and Vilho Ahola, 1998, who selflessly gave their lives while serving and protecting this community. And whereas in the United States, a total of 178 peace officers were killed in the line of duty in 2021, and 48 so far in 2022, and 496 peace officers have died from COVID-19 in both years. And whereas in California, a total of 15 peace officers were killed in the line of duty in 2021, and 3 so far in 2022, and 23 have died from COVID-19 in both years. And whereas the city of Petaluma also recognizes Petaluma police officer Cody Giles as the recipient of the annual Vilho Ahola Most Inspirational Employee of the Year Award, and Officer Garrett Sholin as the recipient of the annual Peace Officer of the Year Award. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Teresa Barrett, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, formally designate May 15th, 2022 as National Peace Officers Memorial Day and May 11th to 17th, 2022 as National Police Week. And I'm going to turn this over to our Chief of Police, Ken Savano.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How many council members for recognizing your public safety
Thank you all. And now we're going on to our next proclamation, which is Emergency Medical Services Week. And Councilmember King will be giving this proclamation to Chief Shop.
Madam Mayor, I apologize. Can I interrupt briefly? The clerk,
Yes?
I'm just getting a lot of comments from the public, just so everyone knows, the audio on the podium is not working. IT is working on it. So the Chief Savano's comments were not heard by the public just now. But we are aware and working on it. I'm just getting a flood of comments on that right now.
Okay. From this end, is the mic live?
It's not something that
Oh,
I should fix. We're
oh,
live. Some of the other microphones aren't, don't seem to be working. They were
okay.
working before the meeting started, so the IT is trying to figure out who's on.
You might have to yell.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that information, but we're going to continue. And with that, I will read the proclamation. Whereas emergency medical services, EMS, is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas each May there is a national recognition of EMS workers, with the theme of this year's Emergency Medical Service Week being EMS Rising to the Challenge. And whereas the Petaluma Fire Department provides first responder EMS care, as well as the continued treatment and transport of the sick and injured by basic and advanced life support ambulances staffed with cross-trained firefighters. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Teresa Barrett, Mayor of the City of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, in recognition of the people that serve this vital care, do hereby proclaim May 15th to 21st Emergency Medical Services Week in the City of Petaluma, and urge all Petaluma residents to support the public safety activities and efforts of Petaluma's first responders, and specifically the fire department's firefighters, who are all certified as emergency medical technicians or paramedics and respond to an average of 15 EMS-related incidents per day in Petaluma. Thank you, Chief Shock.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Have entered thousands of private homes, and Petaluma Fire Department first responders have provided critical emergency medical care and transported thousands of Petaluma residents and visitors to the hospital. No matter the challenge, your Petaluma first responders have and will continue to rise to the challenge to ensure the safety of the community we have sworn our lives to protect. And with that, the support we receive back from our community, and most appreciatively from City Council, makes a big impact on us, and probably means more than you actually realize. Thank you for your recognition. I'd actually like to personally invite each of you to an upcoming badge pinning ceremony. For 4 new firefighter paramedics that will be graduating from our academy at the end of next week. We'll also be honoring several promotions that have occurred in the fire department over the past several months. It'll be Thursday, May 26th, 3 p.m. at our fire headquarters station on D Street. Thank you again for the acknowledgement and for your support. It's truly appreciated. And we did have an engine company here, but it's been a busy day. So hopefully we'll be able to have a little more FaceTime with our personnel if you can make that batch fitting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if Chief Savano would like to restate the 2 officers who got the awards so that the public could hear that. I don't know.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to put my comments to the website.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want that to go unnoticed by our public. So thank you. And with that, we are going on to the rest of the agenda and thank everybody who is here in attendance for these proclamations. So now we're on to agenda changes and deletions to the current agenda, and I believe there are none. Okay, and now we will go into general public comment. And during general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are with, is this what you're going to read?
I can read it. Mayor,
Okay,
if you
good.
prefer.
Okay, thank you. We're
Okay.
still working on the process here.
Sure.
So I'm going to turn this over to our moderator.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, I will start a 30-second clock for the general public comment. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk here. And if you are attending online, please raise your virtual hand or press *9. And let's see, there we go. Okay. And as a reminder, during general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the city council subject matter jurisdiction, meaning that they are items on which the city council has authority to act and not on the current agenda. Public comments are limited to up to 3 minutes per person. Depending on the number of persons wishing to address the council, time will be allocated in equal shares so that the total amount of time allotted to general public comment does not exceed 20 minutes, subject to the council's discretion. And just as a reminder that speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats or obscenity are grounds for removal from the meeting. And at this time, Mayor, we have 17 attendees virtually and 1 hand is raised.
Thank you very much. Do we have any general public comment
I'm sorry?
here in the City Hall?
That's Jen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I'm having to separate these out between ones that are general public comment and ones that are not. So I think I have one more. Thank you. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And how many, did you have 1 hand up there?
Yes, we had 1 hand up, Madam
7.
Mayor.
So that's 2 minutes per person. Okay, and you will
Okay.
start the timer, and we're going to start with people who are in the City Hall first.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. So with that, I'll start with Dr. Lois Moore.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just a minute. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the timer up. We're trying different things tonight, so.
Just be patient with that. Be patient with us, please, because we're having a little technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm not sure how you know whether it's working or not.
I'm getting the timer
Okay.
up right now.
Okay.
So, let's see here. And here we go. And it was for 2 minutes, correct?
Yes.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Dr. Lois Merriweather Moore. I'm a resident of Marin County, appointed by the Governor's Office to the 4th District Agricultural Association, Sonoma Marin Fairgrounds and Event Center Governing Board of Directors. I've been on the board since 2013 and currently serve as chair, and it is in that capacity that I am addressing the Petaluma City Council today. Official communications from the city of Petaluma to the people of Petaluma are expected to be truthful, factual, and helpful. This was not the case with the official communication from a council member to a constituent dated April 11th, 2022 at 9:09 a.m. The communication regarding a fairgrounds event was sent out from the official city of Petaluma.org email system in response to a resident's inquiry. Such communication from the council member. As a community partner with the city council, the fairgrounds respectfully responds to all communications received. It is unfortunate that the communication in question, which listed a fairground staff member's name, position, and email address, advised the resident to send a letter to the fairgrounds. The board does not know who posted it or why it was posted, but the council member's email was posted on the Nextdoor media platform. After the post, there were personal threats made to a fairground staff member, and law enforcement was notified. We must use our words carefully. Words have power, and when they come from people in positions of designated authority.
I'm sorry, your time has ended.
Thank you. And now Wayne Clark. And Wayne, wait to start until our moderator
And
lets
it's
you know.
2 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Wayne.
Okay, yes. About 12 years ago, I was sitting here. Poor David Rabbit had to look at my signs for 2 or 3 hours. And I just can't figure out David Rabbit, you know, that night of the election out there on East Washington and McDowell, he had his signs up with Carly that was running for Senate, Republican. Jim Judd, a Tea Party, who had the nerve to run against Lynn Woolsey, of all people. And Meg, also a Republican. Why would a supposed Democrat have his signs with Tea Party people and all these other right wingers? And they were pretty pleasant people then. If it ever happened today, it would be very scary to be putting your signs out there with Republicans. And I just can't figure them out. I mean, I was just, and another thing, after that election, and he did get elected, I was able to get into his campaign headquarters at Graziano's, which is now the steakhouse over here at Sears. And I was able to get past the gatekeeper because they're always out looking after me. And I walked back, it was crowded. I walked around the corner and there was, oh my goodness, Amy Dutra and Efren Carrillo, who was for the Dutra asphalt plant. Like, why would those two people, they should have never been together in the first place. And why would David Rabbit have them at his campaign? And then he showed up about a half an hour later, but they had already kind of ushered me out the door. Now, another thing, I'm wearing this t-shirt. I got it this last week at the thrift store. Very sad after the Buffalo situation. It basically says every American, every voter, every mom, every survivor, every community. And on the back of my shirt, it says every town for gun safety. I rest my case. Thank you. Good to see you back, Teresa. And I'm sad about the newspaper article that you read.
Thank you. We will go on now to Catherine Brabowski.
You
Yes.
can start.
Okay. I can start now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Catherine McGrath. You know Perry Lane is owned by the city of Petaluma. It's not owned by Waterhouse Management Corporation, Sales Cruiser or family. They actually marked white lines on Perry Lane for her family. And also too, well, I just lost the picture here. And also too, oh, if I can find it. Okay, this is our swimming pool at the Lewisville Motor Vehicle Mobile Home Park. And also too, the Seller Cruise is illegally having her family parked illegally on Perry Lane on the fire lanes, red zone. That's against the law, and park it illegally in the mobile home park on the fire lanes. That could cost someone their life. And I got a neighbor that's purposely trespassing on my place, parking his vehicle right up against my window, invasion of privacy, stalking my place all the time. I've got pictures, over 100,000 pictures to prove this. Nothing's being done. The Seller Cruz and her family and her friends should not be allowed to get away with this at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Darren Recuson.
Thank you, City Council. I just wanted to come up and reiterate my comments from last time about seeing if we can do something to create a committee about the river, maybe more broadly about water resources. I know there's already a committee on groundwater, but just this past week, I've had a lot of great conversations with citizens, including folks coming out of the woodwork who are civil engineers and hydrologists, who have a lot of fantastic ideas about implementing groundwater catchment programs, groundwater capture programs. And I'll save some of those comments for the agenda item, but just seeing if we can put together some kind of committee that would address this broad issue of the river. It's come up a lot in recent weeks when we're talking about priorities for the committee, and really it touches on pretty much every aspect of development in Petaluma. And with that, there's also a broader context of crosstalk. And this is something that myself and I think many citizens are interested in. It's just seeing how the different committees, because maybe this concept of the river dealing with water resources is something that's already covered between one or two committees that exist. And just this past couple months, we've seen several committees hold joint committee sessions. So just advocating to see more of that kind of crosstalk to promote city goals, especially, a lot of times you come back to kind of planning and development, but see how groups focused on natural resources like the tree committee, the groundwater committee would have joint meetings with the planning commission and the general plan commission and really hold more substantive discussions about some of these issues, because I know we kind of use the environment and natural resources part of our lens with how we view development, but it would be nice to see that direct crosstalk where we really have the forum to discuss these issues deeply. And you could even say that with transit and environment. There could be a lot of potential here. Maybe that's already happening, but just wanted to advocate for that kind of robust discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And John Hanania.
Okay, you may begin.
Well, it's been a while since I've been here. On May 2nd, I asked for public record request, and immediately following day, I get an email saying it's not available. And it seemed to be a pattern of your staff that they always refuse to give the public the information. So I made several phone calls with your messed up directory, and it's still messed up, and I don't understand why you can't fix it. And I came down here and I spoke to the lady at the front who was very nice, very kind. But as I'm waiting on the bench to get my information, some coward person in your staff, and I say it again, coward person, when I'm doing nothing wrong at all, call the cops. You think the cops will come in the front door? No, they come in the back door, hiding by the clerk's office, which is, I had a good laugh. I had a really good laugh. Okay, that's one. So I asked about ARPA, about the $1,000 that Peggy said that she's gonna put back. So I got finally my information. But on the 19th of last year, this is what took place.
I'll put my $1,000 on the table, put it right back in the pot. This is not self-serving.
That's a pure lie, because she never put the money back, and it's not the first lie. She's constantly lying to the community, lying to you guys, and I've told you over and over. If your staff tell you the sky is red, you automatically rubber stamp it, the sky is red, and shame on you for that. I read some of the public comments, and one of them addressed you as, you are so messed up, it's pathetic. So I'm not the only one who have an axe to grind, Teresa. It looks like a lot of people in the community are very upset with you. and the way
Thank you. Your
Oh,
time is over.
I'll be back. You can bet on it.
Thank you, Janice Cater Thompson, and that is the last speaker in the City Hall on general public comment.
Okay, you may begin.
I'm ready. And so tonight I really want to talk about our newspaper, and do we really have a free press? And it's like, what's the difference when the owners of the largest news source in Sonoma County manipulate an endorsement for an incumbent? Georgia comes to mind. Trump called to pressure Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to find the votes needed to overturn the presidential election. Well, sometimes that's what our local newspaper does and has done for a long time. In the case of the Argus Courier's recent endorsement, it was the CEO of Sonoma Media who rewrote the endorsement to benefit an incumbent. Tyler Sylvie, editor of the Argus, accelerated his resignation along with publisher Emily Sherrar-Botts, assuming it was done due to the behavior of the CEO of Sonoma Media. We would expect this from a fascist dictator, not a free press. As a reader of the Argus, I admire Tyler Sylvie and Emily for their journalistic integrity and for standing up for a free press. Make no mistake, Sonoma Media has controlled the outcome of many elections in Sonoma County.
Thank you very much. That's the end of general public comment here. And I will ask the clerk if she has received any correspondence on general public comment.
Madam Mayor, yes, we did. We received 9 general public comments prior to the meeting that are posted with the agenda packet.
Thank you very much. And then now I'll ask our moderator to call on the person who had their hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paul G has had his hand raised, and Paul G, please unmute.
Yes, thank you for the time. Listen, we can all do math. 7 times 2 equals 14. 7 times 3 equals 21. Which one is closer to 20 minutes? Why can you not just listen to one more extra minute of comment to allow everybody to get their 3 minutes out? That's kind of disrespectful to everyone. I'm going to suggest you change your policy, maybe even allow 8 times 3 equals 24 minutes. That would be even less than 30 minutes, which most cities do. I suggest you try to look into that, because you don't want to continue to lock the public out as you continue to do with these bogus health emergency declarations. So I found it kind of interesting that you went through all the COVID deaths of the numbers and you went over them in detail. I'm just curious, where's the evidence of that? How do you know those numbers are accurate? Because if you take a look at it, you're going to realize a lot of those deaths were unnecessarily created because proper treatment was withheld. That's the truth of the matter. It's all coming out. So you can't keep using this false excuse to continue to operate under a health emergency. Now, this is something you do need to stand up to, because we are about to lose our national sovereignty if you follow what the Biden administration is doing. On January 18, 2022, with no public awareness, officials from the Biden administration sent to the World Health Organization extensive amendments to strengthen the World Health Organization's ability to unilaterally intervene into the affairs of nations merely suspected of having a, quote, health emergency, end quote, of possible concern to other nations. These amendments were sent forward. This is what he's offering. He is giving up our national sovereignty to a dictator, the director of the World Health Organization. I suggest you actually stand up to this and defend your people and tell Biden not to do such a thing. That's very important right now.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, there are no more hands raised.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close general public comment and we will go on to council comment. And I will start with Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you very much. I have 3 liaison assignments to report on. The first is the Climate Action Commission met last week. Had 3 really informative presentations, one from Jared Hall, head of our transit division, and one from Pete Gang and Veronica Olson with the Safe Streets Coalition, and the last one with John Shribs, talking about the future transportation options that we're likely to see and what's going on in other places in the world. And then also last week I had the Animal Services Advisory Committee meeting. We got our update for 2021, no financials, just data like the number of calls, the number of adoptions, and I believe that information is available on their website. And last I had a Sonoma County Transportation Authority Regional Climate Protection Agency meeting. They did receive a $525,000 grant to conduct a countywide bike and ped plan and update the one that they have. So that was really good news. And then we approved the budgets for those organizations. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you. I have had no liaison appointments since we last met.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So, oh, my microphone's working. Nice. So I was in Sacramento last Wednesday with the League of California Cities. It was our opportunity to lobby legislatures on behalf of cities around the state. You may have seen a photograph emailed out from the League with city officials lined up between Executive Director Carolyn Coleman. I was in that group. This was the sign we were holding, basically asking the state to share funds with cities. And we had 3 specific asks. One was $500 million additional in the new budget for housing. And as I told one of our state senators, we could spend that in Sonoma County on our own, but that seems to be what folks thought could be asked for. Another was $180 million for organic waste recycling. And then most interestingly, there was a request for $930 some million for reimbursing cities for unfunded state mandates over the last 2 decades. And it turns out that one of the offices in the state has tracked those numbers over the years. And if that happens and Petaluma gets what it's asking would be entitled to, that would be $678,000 that we would be getting. So stay tuned. The budget is moving forward on a fast track at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Vice Mayor Posake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a meeting of a data subcommittee of the Continuum of Care, where the major topic of discussion was how long we should be able, the different providers should be able to use the intake form that was done, say 3 or 6 or 12 months prior, and we'll be voting on that at the next meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I had several committee meetings, particularly the Pedestrian Bicycle Committee, and they rolled out the active transportation plan to show to committee members and set up appointments on that. And that's very exciting that we're finally getting to see that basically bicycle and pedestrian plan. Also, they announced Cyclovia, and I'd recommend people to look into that. It's close a street, create a bicycling event, create awareness that there is another way to get around town. And that'll be exciting. And I think that'll be led by the Climate Committee though. And the North McDowell Complete Streets plans were shown at the meeting, and a lot of feedback from the public and from the PBAC membership. And then also in regards to that type of activity, This week, the Petaluma Wheelmen, in concert with Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, are sponsoring a Ride of Silence. The Ride of Silence is a national event to commemorate those cyclists who've died on local roads. We'll be doing it on Wednesday, May 18th, 6:45, meet at Walnut Park. This goes well with the council's goals of creating more safety for active transportation. Also, the Measure O Oversight Committee, the county mental health spending, met and reviewed the proceeds that came from the tax measure went through a year ago. It generates $25 million a year to mainly to the county, and they're coming in ahead of revenue projections. And so they're being able to put a lot of new money into county behavioral health systems and other things that help around the county and help our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember King.
Thank you. I had a meeting with Sonoma Clean Power since our last regular meeting. A good portion of the meeting was dealt with seeing our proposed budget for the next fiscal year, which also coincides with our fiscal budget. The short version is that the agency is in fairly good shape financially, has a decent amount of reserves and continuing to move toward its reserve goals that were set when the agency was formed in 2014. We also had a review of some legislation from the state and took some positions. We unanimously supported Senate Bill 852, which is a Dodd bill establishing climate resilience districts. The summary is that it would allow local governments to form climate resilience districts for the purpose of raising and allocating funding for capital projects addressing climate mitigation and/or adoption. And the bill would also immediately recognize the Sonoma County Regional Climate Protection Authority as a climate resilience district. We gave our CEO discretion with respect to amendments related to SB 1020, which among other things, would create the California Affordable Decarbonization Authority to operate a new climate and equity trust fund. The purpose of the entity would be to disperse funds to reduce low-income and disadvantaged customer utility bills as the state works to achieve its decarbonization objectives. And then there was a third bill, which you all at least at one point we're familiar with, probably still are, and that was SB 1393, which is council unanimously opposed, I think about 6 weeks ago or so, give or take. The Sonoma Clean Power Authority Board also unanimously opposed that bill. So there's, as noted before, there's a lot going on in Sacramento that's going to affect our city, our climate, our energy, something to keep an eye on. The Transit Committee was scheduled to meet. The meeting was canceled due to a lack of agenda items. Youth Commission was also scheduled to meet again. It was canceled due to a lack of quorum, which was the third consecutive Youth Commission meeting canceled for that purpose. We have one more scheduled before the end of the school year. So hopefully we'll have a meeting. But it may call, one of the questions we've been asked to examine is to re-examine some of our commissions and committees. One option may be to shorten the year for the Youth Commission, because the high school kids just either can't or not so much won't, but they mostly can't show up between their studies and their activities. It's a tough time of year. And by that, I mean April and May mostly. So something to consider going forward, and hopefully we'll at least have one more meeting before they depart as a commission. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to know. So now we'll go on to our city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few announcements. The Healthcare District is hosting an informational meeting tomorrow, May 17th at the New Life Christian Fellowship from 5 to 7 to learn more about the blue zones that Ramona Faith spoke to us at the last meeting and what to expect in the months ahead. Their team will be calling on community leaders to learn more about the Petaluma area and collaborate to build a plan for change. On Tuesday, May 31st, from 6 to 8:30, the city is hosting a workshop at the Lucchese Community Center to share our current and future plans to address homelessness in Petaluma. We will solicit community input and incorporate that input into a comprehensive homeless action plan that will be presented to council in June. This past weekend, the Petaluma Fairgrounds Advisory Panel held its first 3-day session. The next one will be on June 3rd. And to view these meetings, you can go to our website at cityofpetaluma.org/fairgrounds and click on lottery selected panel where you will see the videos. And while you're there, we ask that folks fill out a survey to share your thoughts about the future of our fairgrounds. And then finally, the application period continues for city committees and commissions, and applications must be submitted to the city clerk's office by Tuesday, May 31st at 5 p.m. And both applications and information on those committees and commissions are available on the city website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go on to the approval of minutes for the workshop of January 18th. And are there any corrections? Seeing none, the minutes will stand approved as submitted. And we'll go on to item 2, which is the approval of the tentative agenda for the City Council regular meeting of June 6, 2022. It was revised to add 3 consent items: resolution calling the election, approving the holiday schedule, and approving an adjustment to the living wage. Is there a motion, Councilmember Fisher?
Motion for approval.
Thank you. And a second from Councilmember McDonald. We'll have a roll call vote on that.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And with that, we go on to the consent calendar, and we have items 3 through 11. And Councilmember King, I believe you're going to recuse yourself from item 6.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. That property is within 500 feet of my home. And as I have whenever this property has come up recently, I've had to recuse for that reason.
Okay, so we won't take the whole thing in one vote. Does anybody want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, I will ask our city clerk if she's received any comments on the consent calendar items.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we did. We received 1 public comment in response to item number 4 and 17 public comments in response to item number 5. Those are all posted with the agenda packet.
Okay, thank you. And I will open public comment on the consent calendar, and I have 3 people who want to speak on different items here in the chambers. And do you want to read the announcement at this time, or do you want to wait until these people have spoken before we call on, see if there's anybody in the Zoom audience who'd like to speak?
There are 2 people in the Zoom audience, so
Okay.
I can go ahead and read the public comment. Just as a reminder for everyone that public comment is public is invited to make comments on the specific agenda item being presented to the City Council. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence or obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. And speakers whose comments do not pertain to the item may have their microphone muted or turned off and may lose time. And for those virtual attendees, raise your virtual hand or press *9, and I will call on you in turn to unmute and begin speaking. Attendees will be muted when their time expires or when their comments have concluded, whichever comes first.
Thank you very much. And we will open public comment on the consent calendar with Renee Ho for comment on item 7. Followed by Elise Hempel on the same item.
Okay, go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. Hello and good evening, Mayor Barrett, Vice Mayor Posake, and City Council members McDonald, Fisher, Healy, thank you, Barnacle, and King, and City Manager Flynn. Along with all other folks present and those tuning in virtually, it truly is an honor to be here tonight. My name is Renee Ho, and my pronouns are she, her, and Aya. I was born and raised in Petaluma, and now I'm raising my 4 children under 11 years old here. After teaching for 6 years in the US and abroad, I founded Amor para Todos, APT, a Spanish phrase which means love for all in English. APT works with schools and communities in Sonoma County and beyond to cultivate more gender and LGBTQI+ affirming environments, mostly for our youth, but our work positively impacts folks of all ages. I am excited to share with you all tonight about why I'm asking for your support for a community-oriented public art project that APT has been working on for almost a year now with an array of city folks. I started APT to literally save the life of one of my kids. One of my 4 children is transgender, and I learned quickly that there was a 1 in 2 chance that in their lifetime they would attempt to commit suicide. With my teacher background, I knew that there was much work we could do in our schools and communities to create more welcoming and supportive environments for our LGBTQI+ youth and community, so we can uplift them to be proud to be their authentic selves versus just blending in or hiding in the shadows. Representation for all folks is so important. If people do not see themselves in schools and communities, they tend to believe that who they are does not matter and that they are not important. This is one reason APT has been working to bring to Petaluma the first ever creative rainbow crosswalk. LGBTQI+ folks will see the creative crosswalk and know that they are welcome, that they do matter, and that we support them. This crosswalk is for all in our community, not just LGBTQIA+ folks. Suicide affects people of all ages, races, and genders. A colorful and cheerful crosswalk could possibly be that rainbow that gets someone in our community past a rainy day. Also, it can bring people together across genders, ages, racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds through what the crosswalk represents, along with its vibrant, welcoming, and cheerful colors. We believe it will become a destination point, increasing business for our business owners and adding Petaluma to the growing number of cities that are finding creative ways to foster more inclusive communities. I respectfully and humbly ask for your support for this creative crosswalk. I truly appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And followed by Elise Hempel, who will be followed by Darren Rasmussen, who wants to speak on item 11.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. First of all, I have to tell you, working with Renee makes me tired, just so you know. But I'm here to talk about what's going on, and I'm excited to be here tonight. As people say, we're getting back to normal, but normal is not good enough, right? Normal is not good enough. And that's why PPSC has been the fiscal sponsor for APT for the last 2 years and have had the honor to work with Renee. I'm here to talk to you about the importance of this crosswalk. It's not just a crosswalk. The crosswalk is a symbol to so many of the youth in our community. And you heard Renee talk about the chances of young people who would commit suicide or consider suicide. The startling fact is the last 2 years has been immensely hard on our youth in our community. In fact, the Youth Truth Survey did a survey in 2021 and then just completed their survey in 2022. And the fact is that 55% of our elementary students across the country felt supported. That's a lot of kids in our community that don't feel supported. And that's down from 65% in 2021. So kids are feeling less supported.
Our kids in secondary school, junior high and high school, 47% of them say that they do not feel supported by their teachers, their family, and their community. That's down 7% from, or up 7% from those that were surveyed in 2021. So as we look at how this community thinks about some more supporting everybody, whether they're 0 or 109, it's important for us to recognize, like Renee said, that little symbol, that crosswalk will mean something to somebody who's crossing it. And hopefully they will cross it and recognize that this community is there for us. So I encourage you to vote yes on item number 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Darren Racusin is the last person speaking on the consent calendar today.
Thank you, City Council members. I just wanted to make some comments about the kind of renewed declaration of state of emergency and item number 11 about teleconference meetings. I think I speak for a lot of the public that I actually really like the hybrid format of the current meetings. I like the ability for people to tune in via Zoom. You know, myself, I'm not sure I would have gotten involved with civic process without that, as ironic as that is. But I do want to see if there's a way that we can continue this format. Let's see if we can hear me. Continue this format without declaring a state of emergency. I'm sure our city attorney knows what that term means. And although it may not be acted upon, the idea of that basic civil rights, constitutional rights may be changed during states of emergency. That's all an implication baked in there. Again, not that I think the city council is about to act on emergency powers by any means in a way that would violate people's civil liberties, but it does carry that connotation. So, you know, as we kind of progress through the past couple of years of COVID-19, I think we can all safely say, as much as it's not really getting back to normal, we've emerged out of the urgent state, the emergent state, if you will, the emergency of the situation. And so I think finding another way other than rolling through emergency powers to continue to have teleconference meetings has to be achieved, because we can't just keep this going for years and years and years if there's not, again, an emergent pandemic or something of that nature necessitating it. Now, if there's another issue why emergency powers are advocated for other than just kind of a platform to do teleconference meetings, you know, so be it, we can discuss that. But I think if it's literally just to keep this current hybrid format going, there's got to be a way to do this that doesn't have those emergency powers connotations. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will turn it over to the moderator to see if to call on the people on Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are at this time 18 attendees. 3 hands are up. First is Paul G., followed by Sheila Baker. We also have one of our panelists, Jeff Stutzman, with his hand up. So I think, should we take the public comment first? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Paul, please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you for the time, City Council. Nice to see you all meeting safely there without masks, I might add. That's great. Well, I'm talking about item 11 in response to California Assembly Bill 361. We should all have problems with the premise of this recurring item. Comes up once a month. Reading from Mr. Danley's staff report, quote, the Petaluma City Council has the express powers per Petaluma Municipal Code to proclaim the existence or threatened existence of a local emergency, or to ratify the proclamation of a local emergency if the city manager declares a local emergency. This was exercised on March 16th of 2020 when the City Council adopted Resolution 2020-040. Folks, it's 26 months later. There is no actual local emergency. The governor has limited authority to declare such an emergency. That's a maximum of 6 months, meaning the declaration ended in August of 2020. Mr. Danley can easily show you the California code that says so. So it is wholly inappropriate that anyone in our local government can still pretend there's an emergency when there is none. None that is established by the evidence in the public record. Nobody's opinion counts here. It's based on the evidence. Indeed, the evidence in the record that I placed in your record shows otherwise. We have effective treatments for COVID-19 identified. None of you are medical professionals. No opinions matter. The evidence matters. Full stop. So when the staff report opines, quote, "We're still in a declared state of emergency that could put the health and safety of all the public and employees at risk depending on the nature of the declared emergency as a result of COVID-19 continues to directly impact the ability of the members of the city council and the members of the city's supported bodies to meet safely in person," end quote. Well, that is simply not true. Let's see. You're all there tonight, meeting safely in council chambers, not wearing masks. Why would anyone else ever need to wear a mask? You see, the whole basis for this whole take advantage of the public ended in August of 2020. Stop pretending you can still take advantage. What are you saying you're going to do? On the same report, you're going to request staff and visitors to wear a mask inside city buildings. It does say request. Hopefully you can't require. It says limiting the hours the public may enter City Hall. That's a definitely no-no. Full hours should be available tomorrow. There is no emergency. We need to be served. Obtaining permits online rather than in person. Hey, if people prefer that, that's fine. Doing it in person should be fine too. So since you're going to agendize this once a month to keep just extending this along, I'm going to suggest you actually do what Darren suggested. Stop pretending there's an emergency, go back to normal, and still let Zoom happen. That's a good fix for all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker is Sheila Baker, followed by Melissa Abercrombie. Sheila, please unmute.
Hello and thank you. Hello, City Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Good evening. This is regarding item number 4, the Vision Zero resolution, the most amazing, beautiful resolution I think I've ever seen in my life. Big compliments to staff and Ken Eichstedt for pulling it together. I wanted to specifically also recognize a letter of Eris Weaver. And I thought it would be important to kind of read a couple of things that she said. She said to you, this is from Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition Executive Director, "We urge you to pass a resolution before you today adopting the Sonoma County Vision Zero Action Plan and committing to city level actions that will reduce traffic fatalities to zero by the year 2030. This should not be just a feel-good resolution, but a true commitment to follow through on proven interventions to increase traffic safety and reduce collisions. This will require holding firm in the face of the resident complaints that typically surface when any street change results in removing traffic lanes, parking, or reducing speed. Petaluma has already demonstrated leadership in Sonoma County by being the first jurisdiction to embrace quick build and slow streets projects. We encourage you to continue this trajectory." And anyway, I agree with that letter, and I thank you for this resolution and encourage you to pass it. This is wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sheila. And our next speaker is Melissa Abercrombie. Melissa, please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Melissa.
Good evening, council members and staff. I thank you for this opportunity to reach out to you in support of several points. First, I wanted to speak to item number 5, fine balance. I wanted to just share a bit of my experience as chair of the Public Art Committee. We were requested to find a new location, and I'm just very excited to be involved in the subcommittee process of finding the location at the end of H Street, at the H Street Pocket Park. And I wanted to share that experience led us to doing a bit of community building in the neighborhood. And I feel that we have a lot of potential there. And I met a lot of people who are now turning their stance on things and feeling much more excited about this project. And I just really wanted to share that with you. Also, I wanted to speak in support of item number 4, the Zero Vision project. I think it's amazing, and I'm really excited for greater safety in our community. And to the same end, Item number 7, I don't think anything could be added to what Renee and Elise shared. They were just fabulous in their comments. I supported 100% and was so excited to see it come to the Public Art Committee. I'm excited to see all of these consent items and just be able to contact you and share my support. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Melissa. And Madam Mayor, at this time, there are no more hands raised. We do have 19 attendees in our virtual audience.
Thank you. Did you say that Jeff Setzman had his hand up?
He did, and that was a mistake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. We will close public comment and I'll bring it back to the council and Councilmember King.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll move items 3 through 5 and 7 through 11.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by King and a second by McDonald. Any comments? No? Okay, so we will have a roll call vote on those items.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So now I'm looking for a motion, Councilmember Fisher.
Do I have to leave?
No,
at this
no, you
point? I
don't. You just don't have to vote.
You,
Or
you can
can't
remain
vote.
present, Councilmember King, because it's the consent calendar. Thank you for asking.
So with that, I'll move approval of consent calendar item number 6.
Okay, and Vice Mayor? So motion by Fisher for item number 6 and second by Vice Mayor Posake. And we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Councilmember King recused.
Thank you very much. And now we're on to new business. And this is item 12, proposed fiscal year 2022-23 City of Petaluma budget, adoption of the city budget resolutions and introduction, first reading of the fiscal year 2022 to 2023 city appropriation ordinance. And Finance Director Corey Garbarolio will lead this off.
Madam Mayor and Corey, if you don't mind, would you mind recognizing me so I can correct some misstatements that we heard in public comment?
I'm sorry, I didn't notice that
okay.
you wanted to speak.
That's okay. I was
So-
waiting while you're speaking, if that's all right, may I? Thank you very much. So this is in response to some of Mr. McGavin's incorrect statements that he gave in public comment. I just wanted to correct those briefly for the council and for the public who are viewing. First of all, the legal ability that the city council has to conduct hybrid meetings without permitting the public to attend from remote locations from which legislative body members may be attending is pursuant to the governor's emergency declaration regarding COVID, which remains in effect. It has not been rescinded. And but for that declaration, we'd be unable to do that. So it's obviously all the council members are present tonight, but the only meetings that we're conducting live are council meetings right now. And as you can see, there's a number of technical issues we have to resolve to be able to move forward with hybrid meetings, which I believe the city intends to do. Many agencies are not able to do that presently. It's a very difficult thing, as you can see. And the subordinate bodies that the council has created, even including the Planning Commission, have not yet been meeting live. So the ability to conduct hybrid meetings in accordance with the governor's order and the current law under the Brown Act is important. So that's why that's still permissible. I will note, as can be seen, as we've heard from members of the public, that hybrid meetings provide for greater, not lesser, public participation. And finally, I'll conclude by noting there are currently 2 bills being considered in the legislature that would enact changes to the Brown Act that would permit hybrid meetings without permitting the members of the public to attend from remote meeting locations from which legislative body members are attending. And we're tracking those and we'll keep the council updated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I didn't see you wanted to speak on that. Thank you. And so now we'll move on to our Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor Barrett, members of the City Council. Each year, the budget must be presented by a fund department, prepared and submitted to the City Council by the first meeting in May. We delivered the budget at the meeting held on May 2nd, followed by a budget workshop held on May 9th, where we went over the budget document. The fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget appropriations total $311 million and include appropriations for all city funds, including $70 million capital improvement plan that funds a variety of capital projects citywide. Subsequent to the workshop last Monday evening and based on council feedback, there have been 2 changes made to the budget. We've determined that one-time grant funding is available to fund COTS in fiscal year 23, which allows us to make room in the budget for dredging efforts. The Marina Turning Basin dredging and dock upgrade project has been updated to include $400,000 of transient occupancy tax funding in fiscal year 23 for dredging efforts at the Turning Basin and Marina. We do anticipate that ongoing resources will be available into the future for dredging, which will be reflected in the final project budget. We've also updated the pavement restoration and reconstruction project to identify the portion of funding dedicated for implementation of bike, pedestrian, active transportation, and quick build project elements. As more details of each of these projects are determined, staff will return to council for additional discussion. There have been no additional budget changes to the budget document that was presented at the workshop. So with that, it is recommended this evening that the City Council consider the recommended fiscal 22-23 budgets, adopt the resolutions authorizing those budgets, and introduce appropriation ordinances. And staff are here and available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody on council have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Fisher.
I don't have a question, but I have a request, and that is if we could get quarterly updates on our CIP projects, just a little report from Public Works so we can let the community know where things are.
And part of that, thank you for that, and I will work with staff on bringing that to council, but our monthly update also has many of the kind of higher profile CIP project updates, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No other comments. Okay, so I will then ask the city clerk if she's received any comments prior to the meeting on this item.
Madam Mayor, no comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. So I have one person here in the City Hall who wants to speak on this item. So we will open public comment on this item, and then I will ask the moderator to see if there's anyone in the Zoom audience who wants to speak on this item. Okay. So do you want to give your presentation?
Yeah. Just as a reminder that if you are interested in speaking on this item and you are attending virtually, please raise your virtual hand or press *9, and I will call on you in turn to unmute yourself and begin speaking. Madam Mayor, at this time, there are 12 attendees, and I see no hands at this time.
Thank you. So we will start with Darren Racusin.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was at the May 9th workshop about the budget. So just to summarize a couple of things there, I did want to see if we could remove, and maybe this is outside the scope of approving the budget with appropriations, but remove from the city attorney's office priority revising the city wireless ordinance in the budget document that was listed as the #1 priority, the city's attorney's office. I wanted to see if the council could move to remove that from that priorities list. I also wanted to talk about 2 items in particular that I did not mention last time. One was the baseball field that's currently a ready to dig project, 4.65 million, I believe was the figure. Among a couple of things in there, it said it was going to move wetlands to accommodate the baseball field. There was no mention of if this was artificial turf or if this would need to be watered, and the location it's proposed is not really a central location. Now it seems like it's part of a bigger kind of recreational project, and it may be too late to put the brakes on that. That's one item I wanted to highlight, as it represents 1.5% of the city's appropriations that they're asking for. It's like, does this align with the city's goals right now when we're facing things like drought, we're facing issues around environment, making the city more accessible and less car reliant, kind of building a baseball field in that area with that consideration. So I wanted to highlight that project. Also, I noticed that there was 1.5 million for homeless encampment clearing. I mentioned this last time. I just wanted to see if either we could figure out kind of what the substantive steps of that are or move that money elsewhere. And that's really those two items, if those can be somehow adjusted to move into water infrastructure supporting those projects. I know that was another thing I brought up was the big investment in water infrastructure, which I think is warranted, and how that was probably going to result in increased rates as they're revising rates as well this year. So anything we can do to offset that, if there's money being spent inefficiently, can we plow it back into water to make sure that rates aren't raised? And then I also wanted to talk really quickly about the payroll item. A lot of people actually approached me about city payroll. I made a statement that I didn't think there was anything there that was totally kind of blowing my mind. And I was looking for people that were getting paid too much money, essentially. And I want to advise people that you can go into the city budget. A lot of times it breaks down to sub parts of departments and you can really get a granular look at people's salaries. And I also wanted to mention transparentcalifornia.com. It actually has the salary of every city official listed by name. So if anyone listening is concerned about that, go to transparentcalifornia.com and you can look that up. It does require some digging because a lot of people have common names, but those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will see if there's anybody on Zoom who wants to speak on this item. Are there any hands raised?
There are no hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so with that, we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. Councilmember Fisher, followed by Councilmember Healy.
I was just going to go ahead and move approval of the item, please.
And Councilmember Healy?
Well, that's kind of, I was just going to ask the city attorney if we can move approval of attachments 1 through 15 in a single motion. And I don't know if that's what the motion was.
We can.
You're not on. You're not on.
How's that? That's better. Thanks. Sorry, I missed the button. As long as the votes don't change and it's clear that that's what the motion applies to, yes.
So if that's what the motion was, then I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion by Fisher and a second by Healy. Are there any other comments by council members? Not seeing any hands raised. Can I ask the clerk to take a roll call vote?
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosike.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And with that, we are on to item 13. And this is the city council to provide feedback to the council appointed liaison on funding options for the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And we will be hearing from Chelsea Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Barrett and council members. Good evening. Ann Dubé will be presenting for us this evening on the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or Petaluma Valley GSA Rate and Fee Study. Ann is the manager of Community and Government Affairs for Sonoma Water, and she also serves as the administrator of the Petaluma Valley and Sonoma Valley GSAs. On February 7th, earlier this year, Ann presented to the City Council on the rate and fee study being undertaken by the Petaluma Valley GSA that began in the fall of 2021. Ann presented the likely funding options that were being considered for further study and asked City Council to provide feedback on preferred options for City Council member Healy, who serves as the liaison to the Petaluma Valley GSA board. No fee ranges associated with funding options were presented in February, and Councilmember Healy pointed out that fees in Petaluma Valley will be much higher than in the Santa Rosa Plain and Sonoma Valley GSAs, because Petaluma Valley has similar expenses to the other GSAs, but fewer wells to distribute the costs. In February, Councilmember Healy asked council members for preliminary direction to not support the parcel tax fee option, for which there was expressed agreement. And tonight, Ann is here to provide an update on the fee options that have been further developed since February, including preliminary fee ranges for each option for your consideration. Following Ann's presentation, Councilmember Healy may have a comment on the rate and fee options to share with you, and it is recommended that council members provide feedback on the various options. And with that, I welcome Ann Dubé.
Thank you. And I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Oops, not that screen. There we go. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for the introduction. And, oh, I'm sorry. There we go. And as Chelsea noted, I spoke to you all in February. Didn't have any fees, rates at that point, but tonight I'm going to discuss those numbers and also fill you in on the options that are currently being studied. So as you might remember, member agencies have been funding the GSA since its inception in 2017 for about 5 years. And Petaluma has contributed to date about $345,000. So, but now we're in a new phase and we need to fund implementation of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which was submitted to the state in January. And the good news is that generally the basin looks to be in pretty good shape with no significant groundwater problems. The bad news is that there are a lot of gaps in our understanding because we don't have much data. So over the next 5 years, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires the Groundwater Sustainability Agency to fill these gaps and to conduct significant monitoring of groundwater levels, groundwater quality, the potential for seawater intrusion, and the connection between groundwater and creeks and streams. So the initial estimates for that annual cost of compliance will be about $1.1 million annually. So now these big funding buckets on the left-hand side of the screen show the options available for funding the GSA. Of course, one is continued member agency funding. There's potential for grant funding. And then there's funding from groundwater beneficiaries, or there's, you can combine any of those also. The final option was kind of the nuclear option, is the state takeover of the basin if we can't find a funding option and continue to comply with SGMA. That would be a long process, but there's a lot of ramifications for it. So staff went through the 5-year tasks shown on the right and identified the maximum amount that we think would be grant eligible, which is about 40%. And that green column shows how much grant funding that would be. And the blue column shows the amount that would need to be funded by fees, which is about $609,000. We also looked at 25% grant funding, which kind of falls somewhere in between. Now, the first big grant opportunity will be opening this fall. It's a state grant funding specifically for groundwater sustainability plan implementation, but we won't know if and how much we receive until early 2023. So we have a little bit of a timing problem, and then we're trying to move forward with a funding plan for the fiscal year that begins in like a month and a half. So now the most common option for paying for charging groundwater beneficiaries is through something that's a fee that's based on the amount of groundwater that's pumped. So to calculate that fee, the first step is you need to determine how much groundwater in total in the basin is pumped. And the actual numbers we have actual numbers from the city and from small public water providers like schools and wineries and things like that. And that's about 10% of the total groundwater use. But in Petaluma Valley, about 90% of the groundwater pumping estimates or pumping use is based on estimates. And those estimates are developed using studies and reliable sources, including industry information where appropriate. So we're still refining the data in Petaluma Valley, but these numbers are rough, and we're using currently about a total of 2,640 acre feet of groundwater pumped in the basin every year. So to determine what then the fee is, you just take the total revenue that's needed divided by the total acre feet. So that bottom line under total budget shows that based on the full budget, the fee would be about 400 acre feet annually. And if we assume 40% funding through grants, the fee would be closer to $230 per acre foot of groundwater pumped annually. So now we compare that to Santa Rosa Plain, where the costs for implementation are similar, but they pump around 21,000 acre feet annually. And the per acre feet rates there are between $35 and $50 an acre foot. And even in Sonoma Valley, which has about a little over 7,000 acre feet of groundwater pumped annually, those fees are between $120 and $160 per acre foot. So with this high rate and a big disparity, the GSA is considering other options. So the parcel tax, the board hasn't officially voted on any of the taxes yet, so it's still up there, but as you all discussed in February, it's very expensive per payer. There's another option, which would be number 2 is the fee that I just discussed, the one based on groundwater pumping. And then the third option would be a benefit assessment type of approach, which also is a balloted process. It's a transparent process. It has the potential to spread costs more widely among the beneficiaries, but it's costly to implement. The fourth option, which is new, is what we're calling the hybrid option. And it's a bit of a combination. It combines some of the features of number 1 and 2. It's based on a proportional allocation of costs, which are based on the California Department of Water Resources scoring criteria that was used to determine that Petaluma Valley is a medium priority basin and that therefore has to comply with SGMA. So using this criteria, some costs can be allocated to everyone in the basin, which is a flat fee. And then the remainder of the costs can be allocated to just groundwater pumpers, and it's based on their per acre foot usage. So we've just started exploring this option. We have a lot of questions, but it's there's interest in it in that it reflects the fact that having a sustainable source of groundwater for people and the environment really benefits everyone in the basin. So when you look at what this looks like then with these different fee levels, parcel tax is of course the lowest because it's spread among everyone in the basin, and it's a flat fee, $28 per parcel. We have the regulatory fee that's $230 per acre foot. In this example, I'm using that 40% assumption of grant funding. And then the hybrid option would be a $15 per parcel fee plus $120 per acre foot charge for groundwater pumpers. I'm not going to go through all of these examples, but you can see that, for example, the city of Petaluma pays minimally for the tax because there's only a few parcels that would be subject to a parcel tax that the city owns. The regulatory fee would be the highest for the city, and then the hybrid would be lower. But hybrid under the hybrid option, urban residents would pay $15 each approximately, if assuming this 40% grant funding, and they wouldn't pay anything under the regulatory fee. So there's pluses and minuses with all of these options. So given that there's still so many questions and so many unknowns, in April, the GSA board directed staff to slow down the fee study, to not assume that we're going to have a fee in place by July 1st of this year, to reduce the next fiscal year budget to the very bare bones, and to evaluate those risks and potentials for not being able to comply with SGMA over this next year, and to determine a 1-year per acre foot charge based on that reduced budget, or to consider, I guess, other funding options for next year. For example, the county supervisor Rabbit, who's the chair of the GSA, has requested county support for the GSA through its budget process. And 4 of the board members also expressed interest in continuing to evaluate all of the options as potential for funding in years 2 through 5. As I said, there's a lot of questions that are still need to be answered. And if options merit pursuing, we'll definitely need to do additional outreach. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mayor Barrett.
Thank you, Anne, and I hope you will be able to stay for some questions throughout the presentation. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, well, we have a question right away. Okay, Vice Mayor.
I had a couple of questions that I couldn't find answered in my reading of the report. One was option 3, the benefit method. It talked about a 50% weighted vote support by the landowners would be needed. And I wonder, what is the weighting factor there? Is it the water use, or is it the property held, or something else?
Would you like me to answer that, Mayor Barrett?
Yes, please feel free.
Okay, so benefit assessments are really complicated, and our fee consultant is an expert on them, but I'm not. But it really depends on the type of, in this particular, what we're thinking, it was probably based on water use. But it can be based on other factors. If you have a benefit assessment, for example, around some specific projects, it can be the benefit that you receive as a property owner directly from that project. In this case, the fee consultant thinks it would be really based on kind of groundwater use, benefits from groundwater used.
Thank you. I have one other question. In item 4 or option 4, the hybrid model, my recollection from the last presentation was that those numbers 47% and 53% were for the city or area of the Sacramento GSA. Now it appears they're for our GSA. I just want to confirm, is that based on Petaluma or Sacramento or something more general?
In the staff report, the numbers are based on Petaluma, and it's based on looking at different factors that contribute that are related to groundwater use. So, for example, Department of Water Resources, its criteria uses population growth, and number of municipal supply wells as criteria, along with irrigated acres, groundwater wells, impacts of groundwater, and then impacts to habitat. So there's 8 different criteria they use. Policymakers, this was just an initial cut at what that could look like. Policymakers can definitely have feedback and input on those criteria moving forward, because they can be weighted differently.
Right. So the follow-up, I mean, I just wanted to, the 47 and 53 apply only to Petaluma, not also to Sacramento area. Is that correct? Because it seems hard for me to believe that they would both come out identical.
You know what? I can't remember what the Sacramento area criteria is, but the Petaluma one was developed specifically for Petaluma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Could I add one thing in response to Councilmember
Yes,
Plosiki's question?
please.
And please feel free to engage if what I'm about to say differs from your conversations with the rate consultants. But under Prop 218, benefit assessments typically they're limited. What's allocated to properties is typically limited to the special benefit to that property, and typically it has to exclude the general benefit that's not property specific. So based on some of the different approaches that Ann discussed, that's one of the potential downsides of that approach, because it may not be able to recover some of the general benefits to all of having a healthy basin. But Ann, I don't know if you'd like to comment to clarify, or based on feedback the GSAs received from the rate consultants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go to Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few questions. You mentioned the grant, relying on 40% of grant for implementation seems quite risky unless that's a pretty formulaic grant. Can you tell us about that grant, how much funding you're expected, the likelihood of it actually getting awarded, and how many years we're getting that funding for?
Yeah, those are great questions. The GSA has received about $2.2 million in grants and technical assistance to date, which has covered about half of its operations and development of the groundwater sustainability plan and 3 big monitoring wells. So that's been great, but we don't expect that we'll receive that kind of grant support in the future. This next grant opportunity is through the state, the Department of Water Resources. It's $200 million for the medium and high priority Sigma basins. Petaluma falls into that. It's a medium priority basin, and there's about 90 of those basins statewide. So if you average it out, each basin could get, a little more than $2 million. But these grants are competitive. And so it really, we think that $2 million might be optimistic, especially competing with some of the higher priority basins that have some significant groundwater level issues. So in other words, I don't know. We think, I think 40% is the outer limits. I think we might be a little more comfortable with the 25 to 30% grant assumption.
Okay, thank you. And if we assumed 40% in our fee setting, what happens to the delta if we only get 25 or 30%?
Yeah, then the fees need to go up in future years.
Okay. Okay, that's those questions. And then I just want to make sure I understand correctly that basically on the regulatory fee approach, we're just recovering the $34,000 through rates. That's the proposal.
I think that would be up to the council, but generally, I think that's what the other cities, the municipalities in Santa Rosa Plain have been paying a groundwater sustainability fee since 2019, and that's the approach that they've taken. They've passed those fees on to the ratepayers.
Great. The next question, I suppose maybe it's for our city attorney. In our rate setting and our fee structures, are we able to do anything like what PG&E does with the CARE program or anything like that for income qualified residents?
218.
Well, it's difficult to do that under Prop 218 because of shifting costs among ratepayers. So, and I know that's not a very helpful answer. So we'd need to look at the potential for that, depending on which rate approach and which governing body of law applies to see. But it's generally difficult to do that in terms of subsidizing certain ratepayers unless there's a source for that subsidy other than rates. Do you see what I mean? So as to impose the subsidy cost on other ratepayers, that's usually difficult, if not impossible, to do under the law.
Okay. And then it's not lost on me that some of our tertiary treatment is shipped outside of city limits. And theoretically, those beneficiaries would be getting water from the ground if they weren't getting it from the city or purple pipe. Is there some way we can recover the $34,500 through our purple pipe program, specifically to agriculture, like vineyards in the outside in the county?
I don't have an easy answer for that, but that question could be examined by looking at the sewer fee structure and the recycled water charge structure together to see, what can be done there to fully recover costs and also avoid overlaps. That's pretty complicated. Increasingly, the recycled water program, it used to be that recycled water was treated as a cost of dealing with the effluent of the sewer system, and now what used to be effluent is legal water. That's a very valuable commodity that has been critical for stretching our potable water supply. So so those enterprises are becoming more intertwined. And so those rate studies that are planned we'll be looking at some of these questions, and the council will be able to weigh in on some of the choices that will be identified for those structures, just separately from the GSA in terms of our structure. Thanks.
Great. And then my last question is actually for Councilmember Healy, who's been much more steeped in this than all of us. Can you just talk about like the equity issues that you see for Petaluma, like implications for Petaluma residents, and any issues you're really the sort of the crux of the conversation from your point of view?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, but I think I'd wait until after Councilmember King's question is presented, and I think the mayor was going to hand it over to me at that point.
Actually, there's a couple other people on the council who wanted to speak, but yes, I hope you will save that answer or incorporate that into your answer after everybody has asked Mr. Bay there are questions. So hold on to that. Thank you. Councilmember King, followed by Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. Under the hybrid option in our staff report, at page 4, there's a reference to the rate for a City of Petaluma resident would be $15 to $27 annually. Is that supposed to be customer? Are we talking, how is that going to be billed? We don't bill residents, we bill customers. And I don't know who might have the answer to that.
Sure, I can jump in. So
Well, I think Ann, were you ready to answer that?
Oh, well, I mean, that would be definitely like a city decision in the Sacramento area. What they did is the city didn't want its residents, customers to receive a separate bill from the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So the GSA bills the municipalities, who then spread it over the year with their water customers. That's how it happens in Sacramento, but certainly that's not, that's one model.
Okay. And, in terms of the bill, are we talking about sending it to a customer at that rate, regardless of, if you have a home and there's 5 people in there, that's one number. If you have one person in there, that's another number. How is this going to get billed if we use that option? Anyway, that's a question. I don't know if anybody tonight has that answer. To me, there's a difference, but no question about it, a difference between a resident and a customer. And as far as I understand, only customers make payments for water in the city. And the second question is for you, Ann. If you could go to slide 9, or if you have it in front of you, there's a reference also under the hybrid option for a slight increase in urban rates. And I don't know if you can expand on what slight means.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so slight would be, for example, the asterisk by the $28, the asterisk by the $15. Oh, excuse me. So for example, if it's the hybrid option, the city itself would pay $18,000 to the groundwater agency in that example. So presumably those costs, getting back to one of the previous questions, would be shared by all customers. So the $18,000 divided by your customers, I don't know what that number is, but it might be a couple of dollars a year per customer of that $18,000 that would be spread among the customer base. So that's the slight. It's a small amount that would be shared by all the customers over the course of a year if the city chose to pass that pumping fee along to its customers.
Well, thank you. That's all I have at the moment.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I'm still trying to get my head around all the options and permutations. The first question, I guess, is it looks like 3 out of 4 options require an election. At some point, is that correct? Tax election, property, 3 out of 4 of what we're talking about?
Numbers 2 and 4 do not require elections.
Okay. And what's the probable cost of an election to the city? I mean, I've heard numbers like 100,000 to run a small election. Is that a fair number?
Well, actually the GSA would pay for the election. And so the cost to the GSA of placing a measure on the ballot was about $150,000 for a parcel tax. For a benefit assessment, that approach is different. It's a different balloting process, but there would still be pretty significant costs for the GSA because we don't have much money, would be significant costs for doing that balloting process. And I think the fee consultant estimated it's in the $100,000 plus range.
And that cost will be passed back to the city or all the members of GSA if we proceed that way. So there's an avoided cost if we don't do an election of probably several years worth of fees. What percentage of the voting of the GSA is the city's weight?
So each GSA, there's 5 board members on the GSA board. Each one has an equal vote, but the city has special powers along with the county of Sonoma in that there are several items that require a supermajority vote. And for those items, including fees, both the city and the county need to support that item.
I'm looking at the various costs, and a regulatory fee seems like the highest number, but I think it's only the highest to the city itself. If we look at the other fees and say we want a lower city fee, we have a residence fee, and the combined impact to people in Petaluma could be higher from option 3 or option 3 than a pure 34,000. Once you put that fee onto every residence parcel, $28, that looks like it's a higher fee. Does that seem consistent?
Yes, for both. I think both for number 3, the benefit assessment. Again, those numbers for the benefit assessment are super, super rough. That was an example. But for the hybrid, yes, because it would be the $15 times the number of customers and plus the 18,000 groundwater pumping fee. So that would be higher than I'm assuming, than the 34,500. I'm not sure of the exact number of customers, so I don't know.
So let's say we have 20,000 houses or something in the neighborhood of 25,000 services times 15. That's 37,000 plus 18. That's 50,000. So it looks like regulatory is the least, but the regulatory would be the highest for the rural folks. So it feels like we're shifting the weight onto the rural people. And then I'm intrigued by the idea of recovering from recycled water. That's a pretty cool wrinkle. All water that they get from recycled is water they don't pull from pumps and wells. So there's a real nexus there, I think. So if we go on a regulatory fee, a metered acre foot, I think there's an opportunity there. And then I'm not clear of what our water enterprise budget is, but let's just say it's $34 million a year. And this fee we're talking about is $34,000 a year. That's a 0.1% increase in our operating costs for a year. It's probably a question for staff, but does that sound like a right percentage of increase? We're talking about the impact of a 0.1%.
I don't know the answer to
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we'll just put that out there for right now.
Okay, so conceptually, I know that our water enterprise is at least 34 million a year. So let's just assume that's a fair number. I don't know that, well, okay, so that's my questioning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to ask a couple questions. One is following up on Councilmember Barnacle's question about the 40% assumption of grant funding. If indeed we were to get the $2 million on this next 200 million that is available to medium and high priority Sigma basins, is that one-time money?
Yeah, yes, it is.
So how can we budget that in as grant? I mean, how can we then, it ends at some point, and then what happens to the place where that was being filled?
So, yeah, so the GSA, because of the unknowns, this fee study is really looking at the first 5 years of implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan. And we have a very detailed timeline that goes out until 2042, which is the time period that we need to implement Sigma within, or implement the groundwater sustainability plan. So this first 5 years, the grant funding would be basically over those first 5 years. And then for the second 5 years, there would need to be another grant, another fee study or reassessment of the fees.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then the other question I have is that the water fees are based on estimates. And, you know, the city is pretty good about knowing what it is pumping out of the ground because we have meters. But, you know, when are we going to put meters on all the other wells so that we, you know, because these estimates I'm not very comfortable with.
Yeah, estimates have been used for a long time for groundwater pumping because the Sigma does allow the GSA to require meters to be placed on like commercial wells or agricultural wells. It does not allow meters to be required or placed on rural residential wells, which is a significant number of wells and of groundwater pumping in the basin. And so estimates are generally, if they're based in, you know, some kind of specific science and studies, the courts have upheld them as a way to estimate groundwater use. And it varies. I mean, for rural residential, we estimate 1/2 acre foot of groundwater pumped annually by a rural, you know, residential property. And we know that some rural residents with large properties and, you know, a couple of animals and a garden could use a lot more than a rural residential property with a home and a, you know, relatively small footprint. But estimates at this point, because we don't have parcel to parcel information, is the best that we can do.
Okay, but it would seem to me that I would be very uncomfortable with increasing any rates to the ratepayers of our city based on estimates without an intention of going forward in the near future to meter the water that we can so that we know that those estimates are as close as possible to reality, because our goal here is to sustain groundwater. And we can only sustain it if we know how much is being used. And you know, the estimates are just, they don't put ground under my feet. So, you know, so that's an area that I have some queasiness with, especially the idea that our residents in the city of Petaluma who are not using groundwater, except for the, you know, the groundwater that the city uses for everybody, would be somehow supplementing the use by people who are not actually metering what they're using, because we're asking people to pull back on their water use every single day. And they are by and large. And so, you know, I don't want to further ask people to keep pulling back and pay more for other people whose use is not even being measured. So that I have a lot of discomfort with that. So I see that Councilmember Barnacle had one more he wanted to jump back on, and then we're going to go to Mr. Healy.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to Councilmember King's comment. The $15 or $28 numbers on slide 16, are those fixed fees that go to every meter then? Or are those averages and it would depend on actual consumption, metered consumption? Or is it, we don't know?
It would be a fixed fee. It would be that's what this is based on. I mean, I think there's, actually, I'm not sure. It would be a fixed fee though. And I'm not sure, I guess if the city wanted to collect that, I don't know if the city could allocate it differently among its customers. I think that would definitely be something that city attorney should weigh in. So I'm not going to touch that at all. I don't know.
Okay, it's problematic for sure, for me at least. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we can think of these as questions that Mr. Healy can then ask as our liaison. So the ones we're not getting answers for. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Healy.
Thank you. Ann, could you put slide number 9 back up? I think that's just good for us to have in front of us when we're looking at that. So as Chelsea mentioned, there was previous direction to me to not support the parcel tax approach. I think that would be the first preference of my fellow GSA board members if it were feasible, but it's not realistically feasible because you'd have to go to a general election and get a 2/3 vote. And that would be an enormously difficult sell here. So the hybrid model, which has come up recently, is kind of parcel tax light, if you will, because half the cost would be allocated to, approximately half would be allocated to parcels, a high percentage of which are within the Petaluma city limits, and then the rest of it would be on the pumping basis. The Sacramento analogy, where this idea apparently originated, I believe it works out there to each parcel getting a bill something in the $1 a year range. And so the municipal utility there said, we'll just take care of it and put it in rates because it's not worth sending a bill to everyone for $1. But at the $15 level, I don't know that's something that we would want to absorb. But the part of the problem too is that not all of the city is within the GSA boundary. So you'd have most parcels in the city getting a $15 bill, but others not receiving a bill. And that's, you'd have to ask someone in Sacramento why the lines were drawn that way, but they did. But on the other hand, everyone on city water gets the benefit of our backup well system. So, you know, my comments all along at the GSA has been that Petaluma will pay its fair share for our backup well system. And we can spread those among all of our customers, which is pretty much what the groundwater pumping fee does. There is, I think there's probably 3 votes on the GSA to do the hybrid model if Petaluma doesn't object to it, because there is this collective freak out over $230 a year per acre foot, half of that basically for rural residential and more for ag. But let me say a couple things about that. Number one is that Petaluma Water is now paying a little over $1,000 an acre foot for water at wholesale from the Sonoma County Water Agency. And when we add the expenses of our system, our customers, it's not denominated this way on their bills. It's, I think, in dollars per 100 cubic feet or something, some strange metric like that. But if you do the math, it works out to a little over $2,000 an acre foot that our residential customers are paying right now. So, 230, 2,000. I get that it's going from 0 to 230, but still, 2,000 is a lot more. And we all just came through a budget workshop, and our water and wastewater utilities have very aggressive capital expenditure plans for the next several years. So I expect we're going to be looking at rate increases irrespective of this. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Supervisor Rabbit has been pushing, and he said this repeatedly at our meetings, to have the county general fund pick up the costs, these GSA costs for rural well owners. And it now appears to me that there are 3 votes on the Board of Supervisors to do that. Supervisor Hopkins had been on record supporting that, and yesterday's Press Democrat had Supervisor Gore pretty much jumping on board as well. So I think the reality is that rural well owners are not going to be seeing a bill anytime soon. And then one other question was about the assumption on grant funding. I think the assumption that's embedded in these figures here is a little bit aggressive, but not super aggressive. But the thing I wanted to mention is that the GSA does have reserves, significant reserves, and we do have the course for mid-course corrections if the grants don't come in the way we're hoping they might. So I was hoping to get direction tonight to support the regulatory fee approach. As Council Member McDonald pointed out, that $34,000 approximately per year is a tiny, tiny fraction of what our water utility spends every year. It would be pennies, and we could accommodate that easily. I think that there is, as has been expressed here, some lack of comfort going on assumptions on what people are pumping, but without meters, that's kind of the best you can do. And meters is kind of a pitchfork issue in the rural communities. So they're not going to happen anytime soon. So anyway, that would be my request for direction, is to support the regulatory fee approach and not support the hybrid. Thank you. And if I didn't answer anyone's questions, please let me know.
Does anybody have any more questions or comments?
Just to clarify and state that the regulatory fee approach is the equitable approach. Would you?
I think it is, especially because I think it looks like the county is going to pay that for the rural folks anyway. So, yeah.
Must be election season, huh?
You think?
Council Member McDonald has a question.
I see there's 2 questions. One is which structure to pick, and then the GSA board, I guess we'll have to figure out what the assumed usage is, and that's the second question. That's an independent. So that could be another battle.
Yeah, that's a really complicated issue, because there has been a table prepared with estimated pumpers and larger pumpers in the area. But it's all based on assumptions, piled on assumptions. And, it's easy to poke hole in those. And it's hard to know the right answer, because none of those folks have meters anyway. Do grape growers in the Petaluma Valley irrigate as often or as aggressively as grape growers in the Central Valley or even in the Sonoma Valley? Probably not. So.
Any other questions? Well, I'm still going to beat the drum regarding, we may not be able to meter households, but if there are, if we can meter commercial users, I think that is an equity issue, and I think it's essential that we do that and ask for it. And yes, maybe it will be incremental, but that would be my recommendation if we're going to go for the regulatory fee. So, but I think we need to hear from the public, and it would be nice if you could stay for the public comment, because something might come up that your expertise could answer. So with that, I do have two comments here, but I will ask the city clerk if she has received any comments on this item.
Madam Mayor, yes, we received one public comment on this item prior to the meeting, which is published online with the agenda packet.
Thank you very much. And so I will ask the moderator to read the public comment information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have 11 attendees. And just a reminder that during public comment, the public is invited to make comments on the specific agenda item that's being presented. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Those who are attending virtually, if you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand or press star 9, and I will call on you in turn to unmute. And at this time, Madam Mayor, we have one panelist who has their hand raised, and I believe that that person might have been interested in speaking during public comment.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with the people here in City Hall, and we'll call on Janice Cater Thompson, and she will be followed by Darren Racusin.
Good evening again. So I was actually at a meeting last Thursday at the community center. It was put on by Supervisor Rabbit, and there was a lot of people there. And you probably could have, this would have been an overflow room. There were a lot of questions that were asked, and it was people in the rural area. And Rabbit kept talking about 19,500 people in Petaluma are going to have to be paying this fee assessment, whatever was being discussed. But tonight you're pretty clear on the direction you're going. And it sounds like the supervisors are clear on the direction they were going. They certainly weren't clear to the rural community last Thursday night. And I would really like to see copies, see the questions that people were asking. They were in detailed questions. People had a lot of concerns. Some people had multiple residents on their property, and do I have to meter everything? How, and if I have one well for 3 properties, or if I have 2 wells for, X amount, they were very unclear on how they were going to be charged fees, but it seems to be pretty clear how the city of Petaluma's residents are going to be charged. And so I just feel like there needs to be a lot more clarification. I'm really glad they have 3 votes to go ahead and, wipe away the debt for the rural area, but it doesn't sound like anybody's wiping away the debt for the 19,500 people that they kept, or residents that they kept referring to. That was the number, 19,500. And then the other thing was, the supervisor was just slamming the city council the entire time, 4 times at least, about the development that was happening in Petaluma. And he was really trying to pit the rural residents against the city residents. And I was probably the only city member there, but I knew a lot of people in the audience. And I just pointed this out, that this is not a time to pit people against each other. It's the time to come up with a solution and to really understand what this means to our pocketbooks. And that's what people really want to know. And basically, a fee is a tax, except if you do a fee through the water system, you don't have to go and ask the residents or the public to vote a tax in. I mean, it's pretty clear why a fee is just a simple way to go. But I just want you to be very clear on what went on at the meeting on last Thursday compared to this meeting. I mean, this is, much more, it's information, but there's still a lot of information that's missing because 3/4 of the audience aren't here. The rural residents are part of this, and we should all be at least having some type of a discussion so people can really.
I'm sorry, your time has ended.
Darren Racusin, and that is our last speaker here in the City Hall.
Okay,
Thank you, council members. I just wanted to frame this as well, and talking with a lot of people about this issue. The GSA is not a utility, right? So we talk a lot about monetizing benefit of groundwater, but paying tax to support an agency that decides how much to tax people isn't putting groundwater in the ground. So I think we need to understand when we're applying a fee schedule, how long is this fee schedule enacted? When we talk about per parcel, is that ad infinitum? How do those fees change? Especially if we're talking about data collection. And it seems like right now, a lot of these fees would be to fund data collection. Once we have that data, how does scope change on this? And hearing Ann speak, it sounds like by 2042, again, this is something kind of foisted by state law, we need a groundwater sustainability plan, which sounds terrific. But again, once we have that data, then what? What is the groundwater sustainability plan? What kind of scope change and costs does that incur? And are we going to see this per parcel, once we're kind of locked into a per parcel model of fee collection, will that kind of balloon out as the budget increases? And I also just want to talk about too, if there are plans in that context to really focus on solutions. And what I mean is, like I said, a tax doesn't put water back in the ground. So are we talking about water catchment? Are we talking about water retention? Are we framing this to the ag community? Because there are California state tax credits available for water catchment programs. And speaking with a hydrologist who lives right near me on the west side of town, you can pay about $50,000 for essentially a glorified drain pipe full of gravel that'll do a lot for water catchment and be a write-off for the ag community. So I think there's kind of a way of framing this that would appeal a lot more to the public, and a way of understanding kind of what the end goal is. Because like I said, I think a lot of people right now are seeing this as, hey, we're going to levy a service fee to fund this agency that is then going to collect information, and then they're going to figure out how to essentially better monetize the benefit and levy more taxes on groundwater usage. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the end goal? Are we here to just service this organization? Are there plans? And then if there are plans, again, to really do something about groundwater, how does that scope change? And obviously a much bigger budget than just data collection. How does that get integrated into a fee structure? And is whatever decision we make now something we're stuck with? So thank you for the time.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to the moderator for our Zoom audience.
thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have 9 attendees, one hand up with our panelists, and that's Bruce Belli Amon, followed by Bev in the audience. So I'm going to allow Bruce, please unmute and begin speaking.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Bruce Belli Amon. I am a GSA board member representing the Sonoma Resource Conservation District, essentially rural and ag users. So one of the sort of the concepts that I'd like to put back out there is, this is a groundwater basin, a watershed, and we're all in it together, city and rural folks. And I appreciate the comment from the earlier commenter about this isn't really the time to pit one against the other. I think we're in this basin together, and it serves us all best to spread the costs fairly and do as good a job as we can on that. And admittedly, we're in the kind of the beginning of this sort of process of trying to figure out what that fair approach is. And sitting on this board, the GSA board, so far, I haven't really seen the fair option yet. And I'm not sure that it's going to exist. So we're doing the best we can. I appreciate what you are doing here, trying to help us narrow down, what we should be considering. But I would hope or prefer that we could keep all of our options open until we get more information. I think that there's some hope that the hybrid approach can be fleshed out a little bit more and possibly come closer to that fair solution. I just don't want to kill it at this point when we're still starting to kind of figuring it out. And I'm afraid that if Mike comes back to, Director Healy comes back to our board, with the direction, let's go with the, putting all the cost on the pumpers in the rural community, that could, basically effectively kill further investigation into the hybrid option. And I'd like to keep that open. One quick other comment before my time runs out. In sort of this fairness idea, we wouldn't be a medium priority basin unless the city of Petaluma was present. It was in the criteria from the state, it was the factors of population and the presence of the city that basically put us over the threshold into this priority basin situation. And so I feel it's going to be very hard for the rural community to accept paying all the costs when they weren't the primary source of this issue being foisted on us. So thank you. My time's up and I'll stop.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Bev at Protect Wild Petaluma. Bev, you may unmute and begin speaking, please.
Hi, thanks. I somewhat hesitate to speak because I have to admit, I don't know a lot about the subject. But that said, one of the first things, I think one of the most important things is we need to know how much money we have in the bank. And by that, I mean how much water. And, what we have now, we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know whether we're going to have a drought next year. So, all those factors need to be taken into consideration, as well as the fact of climate change. And what we do with the water and the ways in which we invest that water, is very important to our climate footprint. And I think that we really need to pay attention to that and make decisions based on that. Because otherwise we become like, daddy and mommy are sitting in the car and there are 3 kids in the back seat and one wants to go to LA and one wants to go to Disneyland and one wants to go to Yosemite. And they're all screaming and seeing who can scream the loudest. And there needs to be somebody who is going to decide this is what's really important for us to do as a community. And that doesn't mean only listening to one group or only listening to another group, but it does mean really making a wise decision, something that's going to be wise down the road, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now. And so what is decided about this issue is a very far-reaching decision. And I guess that's mainly what I wanted to say, is to keep the climate, the environment in mind. Do we want to support, for instance, dairy, agriculture, wineries, more houses? We can't have it all. And what are we going to do about that? I think that question needs to be looked at. And that's all I have to say. And thank you for listening.
And Madam Mayor, we actually have another hand raised. John Shribs, please unmute.
Okay, thank you. I'm John Shribs, and I happen to be also a member of the advisory to the GSA supported by the City Council. And I've been up on the committee here for 2 years. And so I've been following this along. And what I wanted to say is that I fully support what Anna said and what Councilmember Healy has said. We are required to have a GSA. We are required by the state to do all these things, and it has to be funded. But the GSA, Ann and her team, mostly with the water agency behind it, are exemplary. They have worked really hard to garner grants, to get monies, and they're very professional, and they've been super efficient about getting monies, and also it's science-based what they have done over the last 2 years. And so I've been really impressed with the work that's being done. We have a fantastic GSA team on our side. So they're doing the best they can. And we do have to keep it solvent. So yes, I personally support that. Yes, we have regulatory fees like Mike Healy said, but I think there's going to be a huge effort by our team, by the GSA team in our basin, to support the city and the county folks to find the monies, to put money back into regenerative agriculture and recharging of the basins. I just talked to someone last night at a meeting about regenerative agriculture and how we might be able to get more water infiltrated in the soil using regenerative agriculture. And if that's possible, we can find grant monies for doing that through the federal government for regenerative ag right now, and start recharge and return money back to the agricultural sector here, the rural sector, through these various methods. So I agree with Mike Healy. I think yes, we're going to have to charge and live with that for the moment, but I think we have a team that's going to be very supportive and make that happen. So I just want to compliment the GSA and the process that's gone on the last 2 years. It's been a wonderful time there, and I'm fully supportive of that organization. Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, there are no more attendees with their hands up.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. And see, okay, Councilmember King, and I see almost everybody else wants to speak. Okay, go ahead.
I actually have a question for Councilmember Healy. In reading the report, and I can't say that reading the report made me anywhere near an expert on this subject. It seems very complex to say the least. The one option that seemed to me to be the fairest, although some of the conversation that I may have swayed me just a bit, was the hybrid option. So my question is this: with that preface, you suggested the regulatory fee option might be the better one for the moment. The hybrid option, one thing I gleaned from the report and the presentation is it's not fully baked. It's not really clear what the numbers would be, and that there's a little more time needed to try to sort that out with a little more finality. If we went with the regulatory fee option now, is there anything preventing this agency from down the road re-examining how rural and urban customers are billed? And maybe by that time we'll have a better idea what the hybrid option's all about. So hopefully that is a question. It's a bit of a statement, but it's also a question in there, I think.
Councilmember Healy, do you want to respond? Because you might get more than one question from each of us, so you might.
Sure. So yeah, I do believe there would be an ability to change approaches down the line. The county's stance on reimbursing rural customers may not be steady over time. They may change their attitude on that. And yeah, no, we can certainly revisit that over time.
Right. And my second, this is more of a comment. I agree with the mayor. I realize this is not going to happen, and this is not what's being asked of us right now. But having meters to be able to measure water use seems appropriate, and to the degree that can be pushed out there as a concept. And I realize this is a political decision, and people fight to the death over water, but it does seem to me to be the appropriate thing to do with regard to measuring usage. The urban users are measured. I think there might be a way, but those are my comments and questions, and I'll stop there. And I do want to hear.
If I could respond to that one,
yeah,
just very briefly. It's kind of ironic that Sacramento is being raised as an example, because the city of Sacramento was one of the last holdouts for putting meters on residential customers within the city limits.
Right. Yeah. Well, people don't like to have their water usage known, I guess, or pay for all of it. So in any event, those are my comments and questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher, then Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. In reading the staff report, that I came away with thinking that the hybrid option was the better option at this point, knowing that we don't have all the information that we need. But I agree with Bruce. I'd like to keep that on the table if possible, because it includes both the regulatory and then seeing if there's another piece that can be added to it to create more equity. And in regard to the comments about about the way we manage our water and the fact that it's such an incredible resource and is only going to get more valuable over time, particularly if we don't change our ways. But I remember going to the meetings and asking the question about, are we having programs and teaching the rural communities about how to slow it, sink it, spread it, which is what we talk about in terms of getting water infiltrated back into the ground. And apparently that's not the subject right at the moment. We're trying to figure out the fee rate and then figure out, okay, how do we start getting more water into the ground? Because that is our future if we're going to survive this.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of express support for the concept of all regulatory right now. I think, it's basically punting. If the county steps up, if the city steps up, then the decision on whether to tax and whether to all goes down the road a year. And I think it's of an economic level that it's better the city and county handle than to put it on the rural residents particularly, and also on parcel taxes within the city.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle and then Vice Mayor. And then Mr.
Thanks. I'm just having trouble with the idea that any of it's fair other than the regulatory fee. Like, well, pay for what you use, right? We know what we use. And board member Abelli M and I appreciate you coming in. I'd actually, if we can open him back up, I'd like to just hear what is unfair about people paying what they use. Because as Councilmember Healy said, our ratepayers are paying $2,000 per acre foot, and we're asking rural residents to pay $230 per acre foot. And I just don't see how it's unfair for people to be paying for the water they're using. So if you want to address that, I'd appreciate to hear the other perspective of why it's unfair to ask people to pay for what they're using.
So I don't know if committee member Abelli Amen is on a panel standard, or if he's, yes.
Yes,
So-
he is.
Okay, so if you could unmute him and if he's willing to respond to
He's
that.
able to unmute himself.
Oh, okay. Are you there?
Mr. Abelli Amen.
Yes. So there's like two sort of aspects that I can provide an answer to that question. One is the rural folks have always paid for their own well systems, and installing wells and operating them is not inexpensive. And they've taken that responsibility and they've done that themselves. This law has been foisted on all of us, and which I support. I think it's a good thing overall to have sustainable groundwater into the future. But for them, there's no benefit from it. They're going to have the same system. They're just going to have to start paying for it. Whereas they didn't have to pay before. And I feel like we all benefit from being surrounded by ag, open space, and this could potentially put some of the operations that are sort of on the edge out of business. And that would be unfair, I think, or to me. And another thing is when the Sonoma County Water Agency and we decided to build the Warm Springs Dam, Lake Sonoma, which is where we get most of our water from the city, from a different watershed, a different basin. That was a parcel tax, and we all paid for that, including ag and the rural residential landowners. And they get no benefit directly from that because they're not on that water system. But they've been paying for that ever since to build it and ever since. So it almost seems like a perfect analogy, like, okay, they've been paying for something that they never benefited from directly. And now it's sort of time for maybe for the city to return the favor. And that's just the way I look at it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thanks. It does answer my question. I disagree, but thank you for addressing it. I grew up in the country. We had 4 households on the same well, and it was a constant struggle of who's using more because we didn't have meters. And finally, one person installed meters because they were so frustrated with watching the other people have lush grasses and big vegetable gardens and big trees and everything. And I feel like asking people to pay for their fair share is actually going to create more of a demand among the county to actually start metering things. We might actually see it get there, but if we keep subsidizing them, we won't. So I'm all in on the regulatory fee and wouldn't support any of the other ones. In terms of, I just want to address the idea of the county giving money to subsidize this. I think that's a really, really terrible use of taxpayer dollars. You know, to the Board of Supervisors who are considering doing that, there's people who are risking losing their house right now, who can't pay for transit right now, who can't pay their water bills right now, and for you to be giving big breaks to vintners and other organizations that can certainly stomach the fee. Must be election season, and you should be proud. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, McDonald, Barnacle, Pussycat. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think it's a difficult decision, and I certainly support what is it, item 2 at this point, the
Regulatory fee?
the basically getting all the money from the rural users. Although again, I'd like to keep the option of the hybrid system open, although my own feeling would be that 47% may be too much to ask from city dwellers. On the other hand, I think that anything that has people saying that we're all in this together has some benefit. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm just going to weigh in that what one of our public speakers, Mr. Rakusin, said really resonates with me, is that, you know, we're not just doing this to pay for this organization to continue into the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. We're trying to get people to conserve groundwater because it's finite and we have to use it, all of us. And while I agree that the rural users who paid for Warm Springs Dam didn't get that water, they actually got the city from not using groundwater by using that water, and had longer use of groundwater. But I really, I know that there's more work to be done in terms of finding out what's the fairest way to go about it. But from my perspective, I'm in favor of the regulatory fee, but with the caveat that we ask those who can be required to put in meters ASAP. And then, you know, really educate other users who we can't require about why that is a good thing for them in terms of their own sustainability and their own water use. So I don't want to close any doors. I don't want to give direction to close any doors, but I do think that the regulatory fee is the most just one at this point. So, Mr. Healy?
No, thank you. I've gotten the direction I was looking for. I just wanted to make a couple of points in response to some comments, because I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. First of all, our GSA has adopted a groundwater sustainability plan. It's been sent to Sacramento, and they have several months to review it and decide whether or not to approve it. Our plan looked out into the future under a robust selection of drought and rainfall assumptions. Our groundwater basin performs well under a large range, basically the entire range of those simulations going forward for drought. And so we should feel that we're in good shape. And one thing that's interesting is that as GSA staff was preparing a list of who they believe the largest pumpers are in the groundwater basin, one at the top of the list is actually a vineyard that we are going to be hooking up to recycled water in the near future due to the state grant. So that's another step in terms of improving the groundwater sustainability going forward. So anyway, thank you.
And I also want to thank Ann Dubay for staying with us on this discussion, and appreciate your input, and thank you very much. And so with that, we are finished.
Can I make
with-
one last comment? Sorry.
Who's speaking?
I'm over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna argue that we have a plan, but we also have a plan that has a lot of gaps. There's a lot of information we don't know. And so I'm not sure I actually trust that plan when it says we'll be fine, no problem, when there's so much information that we don't have. So I just wanted to raise that.
Part of why we need meters. Anyhow, thank you for doing this work, Mr. Healy. And with that, we are done with our business. And again, I'd like to adjourn in memory of those who were murdered in Buffalo, and also in memory of the more than 1 million Americans who've lost their life to COVID-19. So thank you. Good evening.